There you go. Peter, how are you, sir?
Good, good. How you doing today, Kevin?
Doing well. So we were just, I go through these interview prep notes, prior to these things and try to pull out some nuggets. And I was just explaining to you that I picked up a, kind of an odd habit during COVID. At least my family thought it was odd. I tried to, run every day, and we live on a golf course up here in Maryland. And when I was running, I would, inevitably see a golf ball. And so I started, my runs, I'd come back with like 7, 8, 10, 12 golf balls. I'd have like, pockets full of golf balls. And my kids are looking at me like, what the heck? What the hell's wrong with dad? And my wife is like, you need a better hobby. But, kind of the why I bring that up is that, you have a storied, not just background and family and this channel, but you have a storied entrepreneurial journey starting at an early age on the golf course.
Yeah. Growing up as a kid in Florida, here in Tampa, Florida, back in the '90s, we found ways to occupy ourselves in the neighborhood, right? So we were always out on the golf course, after hours. Obviously, we go out there play football and whatnot. And back then, and it's still a thing. A lot of kids will do, like a lemonade stand, or sell, like the girls will sell Girl Scout cookies. We were looking to get a little extra cash in our own unique way, so it was actually originally my brother's idea, and then the whole neighborhood gang got together. So we had a group of like 5, 6 kids all running around the golf course, jumping in the lakes, going in the woods out back, and grabbing golf balls to sell them at a discount price to the golfers. So that was kind of, I guess, my first foray into entrepreneurship. Is especially if you go get those Pro V golf balls, right? Those were always
Oh
a
yeah,
premium. If you get those
absolutely.
out to people, that's big bucks when you're a kid.
Absolutely. No, that's one heck of a way to make a little side hustle. And then, I guess moving on, kind of as you matriculated, off at military school, you found another way to kind of make some scratch on the side as well, huh?
Yes. So for high school, I went to Admiral Farragut Academy, which is a military school over in St. Petersburg, which is in the Tampa Bay area. So I was a boarder there, and it's a military school, so you have to have a buzz cut, right? If you don't have a buzz cut, the gunny's going to come after you. He's going to make you do 50 push-ups, and then go to the school barber, who's just going to give you a number 2 all around the head, and that's not a good look. So and they also charge you money, right? You got to pay money to get your haircut. So one of the things I did is I just bought a wall, one of those wall hair trimmers, and
Uh-huh.
I cut my own hair back then, and then I started cutting my roommate's hair, and then I started cutting all the kids' hair on my hallway, and then I said, well, hey, if they're charging $10 to get your hair cut over at the canteen, or 15 at Great Clips, I'll $5 and I'll do it right here. You don't even have to leave the dormitory. So I ended up doing a little side hustle there as well. That was just sort of something small, and just doing my community service for my school as well.
There you go. No, like I like kind of going down those paths, right? The early exposure or experience to entrepreneurship, and how that impacts kind of later in life and kind of decisions you make, and then kind of preps you for the hustle and running an organization. But kind of there's one more stop along the way before we kind of get into this tech world. But there was well, I guess it's tech, right? You come off as an outdoorsy type of individual, and I think one of the first maybe more tech focused endeavors that you had was writing a mobile fishing app. Is that right?
Yeah. So this latest endeavor actually is where I met, the co-founders of ConnectSecure at the time, Cyber CNS. So I grew up, growing up in Florida, I was, always, an outdoorsy kid, I guess, played a lot of video games as well. But we do a lot of bass fishing, and there's plenty of little apps online that you download one to get the lunar phases. You'd go get the Weather Channel for the weather. And so what I did is, I guess where this started is, Shiva and Shrikant, they were, and my father, they were all working at ConnectWise at the time. And Shiva said, he offered, my dad said, hey, would either of your sons be open to coming to India to spend a summer and learning a little bit about programming? So my dad asked me, and I said, why not? That's a trip of a lifetime. So I actually ended up spending my summer going into senior year of college over in Bangalore with Shiva and Shrikant. And I learned how to do some very basic programming. Really, all it was just taking a couple of different APIs and stringing it together into an interface. So I got I found a project on GitHub that you'd input your latitude and longitude, and then the day of the year, month, year, and then it would spit out what the lunar phase is. And then I did another API call for weather. And then based off, the lunar phase and the weather patterns, you could say, okay, well, probably want to use a Senko. You probably want to use a rattle trap, different baits.
Huh.
And, obviously also like full moon, nighttime, really good for fishing. Full moon the day after, probably not so good at fishing because they just gorge themselves all night. So there's a lot of different factors there that I kind of strung together, put into a little app. I actually ended up getting it onto the App Store. And I just, I didn't charge anything, but that's kind of how I learned a little bit about programming. And
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, that's how I got to have a really good relationship with Shiva and Shrikant, who are also the co-founders of ConnectSecure. And that sort of was the beginning of what led me here today. Helping lead this company, help grow it into something special, or what we're trying to make something special for the channel.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, we'll get to the kind of that where you are with ConnectSecure now, but again, you have one of those names in the industry that just about everybody recognizes. Last names I'm referring to, right? Kind of a royalty, I guess, in the industry. But so it's interesting because you went down these different entrepreneurial paths, and there's obviously an intersection, right, between going out and spending your summer, your senior year of summer college in India learning programming. Was it after that you came back to ConnectWise and started as a project manager, or was that before?
So every summer throughout after I graduated high school, every summer I'd spend at ConnectWise working in various departments. I worked one summer in marketing. Pretty much all my time was actually spent in support, working just basic support tickets, simple things like setting up people service boards, setting up agreements, small things like that. That's kind of where I spent most of my time. And so every year in college, I would go, back to ConnectWise, work support tickets. And then senior year, I got to go to India and do a little bit more fun stuff with development, and kind of got to do my own thing for a little bit. Obviously, that app didn't take off. I think I only had probably about 30 downloads. It was pretty much all friends and family. But I ended up, after that, I ended up taking a project management role, and I worked with Shiva's team, Shiva and Shrikant's team, to bring a couple of, more fringe products, to market over there, like Chat, Unify for Cisco, Cloud Console. Helped on those projects. And, I got to have the pleasure of going back and forth to India a lot and spend some time with the dev team there, and really foster some deep connections with that team, which have stuck with me all these years later.
That's great. So kind of moving into kind of where you are today, right? You said, I think you wrote that, Shiva and Shrikant are almost like father figures, right? And you kind of matriculated at a really interesting time, right? You had the benefit of seeing, the rise of ConnectWise, right? Probably at its most formative, period, right, where it's really starting to get acceleration in early, kind of mid 2000s, maybe mid teens or what have you, and then they go through the private equity round and really become where they are today. But along the way, right, you got Jiva and Shrikant, and I think at the time they had, I think it was called Cyber CNS prior
Hmm.
to kind of the rebrand of ConnectSecure. But what kind of led you down that path of you going back, maybe teaming up with them, but then you're really kind of entering this whole vulnerability management space because you're entering, to really interest, that space in particular, especially the last 10 years. I feel like it's been underserved, right? You've had, shots here and there from the Qualyses and the Tenables and what have you, trying to go from enterprise down to our, the mid market down in the MSP space, and and quite honestly, they haven't really done it very successfully. But you had still had some, large major players out there. You had a fragmented MSP space, but really, what was kind of the impetus behind kind of jumping on board with these guys and taking a crack at the vulnerability space?
Sure. So, I mean, like I said, I've worked with Shiva and Shri for a very long time. They, formulated Cyber CNS, which is now ConnectSecure. Back in they started work in 2020. It really started taking off in late 2021, early 2022, and started what went off to the races. And really, like you said, is sort of how it all started, right? Um, Tenable, Qualys, great products. They're more focused for the enterprise space, and for that reason, they've priced themselves in a way that's largely unobtainable for most MSPs to provide truly good vulnerability management. There's been some products out there like Rapid Fire Tools is a great example of a product who
Mhm.
got in there early, created a pretty good solution, and they've done a pretty well, good job in the market. But I think people were looking for, is there any kind of alternative to, and then also people were looking for a solution to kind of do more truly continuous scanning, right? Not taking snapshots in time, like the legacy players like, Nessus does, but they want something
Mhm.
that's continuously scanning every hour, every day, every week, constantly remediating those vulnerabilities that are popping up. And so, Shiva, Shrikant, and Andrew Morgan at the time were kind of the people who were the nucleus of Cyber CNS, and they brought together a think tank of MSPs, and they sort of asked, like, hey, what are some gaps in your stack right now? And one of the things that kept coming up was, well, we don't have anything that's really good for true continuous vulnerability scanning. So the team took that, went back, created an MVP, brought it back to the group, had them test it out. They continuously said, hey, I'd like this tweak, I'd like that tweak, I'd like this additional feature. Um, Take that feedback, go back to the drawing board, shore up the product. And that cycle kept going over and over and over again. Um, and that feedback loop sort of turned into our weekly partner call. So every Wednesday, most Wednesdays, at 11 a.m. Eastern, we invite all of our partners to come onto a Zoom chat room with,
Mm.
Shiva, Shrikant, myself, Rashali, Ryan, Cooper, pretty much the whole leadership team, the whole engineering team, to sort of just listen to, what are they looking for in the product, what's not working in the product, what they, what new features they'd like, what new products they'd like us to bring, to just sort of get that feedback loop and keep alive what really was, the founding success of the company. And we've kept that alive, and we keep listening, we keep maturing, we keep improving. Sometimes we stumble. Um, but overall, that feedback loop is sort of what we hold true to ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially from a, leadership standpoint, embracing the stumbles, right? Learning from them and then, picking your stuff back up, getting back on your feet and moving forward, I think is one of the most important things that you can master. I mean, it's great to have all the success and all the velocity and all that stuff, but I think true testament to leadership and being in these roles is being able to face that adversity pick yourself up and move forward. And it's interesting. And if they started in 2020, right? They're at this, and it doesn't really follow. There's not the exact formula for every startup, right? Because some achieve tremendous velocity early, some take years. We had a podcast last week with somebody I've known for the last 20 years, and they're really, they're in it for the long term. They're not thinking about velocity. But you kind of came in at a point where you've got the product. You've seen that there's obviously a need. There's maybe one or two names in the marketplace, but there's probably an appetite for another option, right? And you're also coming at a time where the industry, especially 2020, 22 to 20, 21, 22, you've got that additional compounding challenge of COVID and moving beyond the perimeter and all that stuff. But I'd imagine coming in and kind of assessing where the organization was and how they're developing and kind of engaging with customers, and then trying to get your mind around that and moving it forward and getting to the point where you have not just a real solution, but you're constantly iterating and moving faster. I mean, for you, what were some of the challenges kind of as in this leadership role in kind of coming in and picking up the flag and moving this thing forward?
Sure. So I'd say, when I came on board, the three things I really, wanted to nail down when I first came on board is I want to put together really strong support and documentation. So what we started out with was, I brought on actually one of my old managers from ConnectWise, Ryan Seymour. He was working at a consulting organization up in Detroit, Michigan. So I brought him on to kind of revamp our documentation, to build video guide series, and to start putting together, a strong support team to knock out a lot of the tickets. So, I feel like if you're going to overinvest in any area, it's going to be in creating great resources and great support for your existing partners so that they feel like they are supported and they do have somewhere to, ask questions, vent their frustrations. And then also a ton of, actual documentation, videos to learn about the product. So that was my number one priority is fixing or improving that. Number two was to get ourselves accredited with all of the, required certifications, right? So SOC 2 Type 2, GDPR, ISO 27000. So we worked internally to shore ourselves up and to get all those accreditations. So, when people did have questions about our technology, especially as a startup, right? We're trying, a lot of times it's green fields when we're making a new sale, but, a lot of times we're actually trying to get somebody to switch over from, big established legacy players like, Tenable and Qualys. And people are like, well, who's this ConnectSecure company? Well, we are SOC 2 Type 2 certified. We're ISO certified. We're GDPR certified. We have cyber insurance. So that kind of helps legitimize ourselves as a startup. And then finally, the last thing is to put together a small, what we call solutions engineering team, right? So before I came on board, pretty much all of our go-to-market was through distribution relationships. And a lot of people would come in and ask, hey, well, I'd like to just purchase directly from you guys. And we did have a decent amount of folks who did that, but we didn't really have a good team to support that. So we got together a group of about four younger guys out of the Tampa Bay area to help do demos, to help take calls, to help facilitate people through that journey of evaluating ConnectSecure, and if they like the product, then to buy. Really help accelerate our revenue, and then also double down on our distribution relationships. And also, if that distributor's overloaded and they don't have time to do an onboarding session, a demo, we can help take that over for our distribution partners. So those were kind of the three things I came in and I really wanted to shore up is just kind of get the basic blocking and tackling of the organization down put, right? The team put together a great product already. It's just a lot of the small details that surround a great product to make it a great experience is, where I focused a lot of my initial time.
Yeah, that's so important because again, you're thinking about kind of we always often talk about this maturity model in the MSP space. The MSPs are maturing, and call it maybe the upper 30% of the MSP market, really has a grasp on not just asset discovery, but vulnerability management, patching, threat detection, all that stuff. Kind of that whole ecosystem, and then you have kind of the rest of the other 70% of the marketplace that's either immature or maturing. And so I think that's in general that's sound advice for any vendor is that the first thing you need to do, especially in the MSP space, right? You need to invest in that enablement. You need to invest in kind of the tools and the resources that aren't just going to, you just don't want an MSP coming in, and especially if you're a displacement product at times. You want them coming in and trying it once and not feeling like they don't have the enablement, and then you have that failure to thrive within their customer base. And it sounds like you kind of started the right way, and I think there's a hallmark, or that maybe a hallmark, that's a fundamental thing that any vendor thinking about this industry should be doing. In fact, you kind of picked up on those as the first three things to do. Really is paramount with any vendor coming into the space. But so to that point, right? So again, you're talking about you've got vulnerability management. Under that, you guys are playing kind of in that compliance management space. You got threat detection and prioritization. So you kind of stack ranking and saying, hey, this is what you need to be focusing on. And then you have the remediation. I mean, where do you feel MSPs get tripped up the most, just in general? Kind of, if you're looking at that as kind of a life cycle of a security solution, is there a particular area that you see MSPs struggle with, and how do you guys help overcome that?
I guess the big issue, or at least the big reason why a lot of MSPs actually end up evaluating our product, is to kind of get their foot in the door with security. Mm-hmm. Doing a proper risk assessment, identifying, like you said, okay, first of all, what are all the assets that I would be responsible for on this customer's network? What are all the vulnerabilities? And then, taking it a step further and having those conversations with their customers to say, okay, well, what are your critical business assets? What are your revenue generating machines? Identifying those, tagging them as such, putting tighter SLAs on, ensuring those particular machines are protected, they're, up to date, they're within compliance. I would say the biggest pain point, at least for now, that we're uncovering and solving for is getting their foot in the door with cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And then also, vulnerability management is a critical piece of, insurance coverage for the MSP's customers. So the MSP can use a product like ours, do regular vulnerability assessments, prove, show that progress over a time period of, lower vulnerabilities, having, a scope of all the assets on that particular network as well, and use that to, help their customers get, better rates on their cyber insurance coverage.
Yeah, and so you're right in the slipstream of where I think most of these MSPs are, and you've got that intersection of cyber insurance. I was going to ask about that, and you've addressed it, which is great. But I think I cut you off there. Sorry about that.
Oh, I was just going to say, in addition, right, you had mentioned compliance. For the most part, the bread and butter of what we do is vulnerability management, right? So, mm-hmm. doing scans, identifying the assets, identifying the vulnerabilities, and then we have patching built in to remediate those all in one fluid motion. But also, we can scan, compliance controls, right? So if the MSP is scanning a doctor's office, they're going to need to be, HIPAA compliant.
Sure.
If they're scanning, a point of sale solution, they need to be PCI compliant, so on and so forth, right? A lot of MSPs in the UK will, partner with us specifically to help put some guide rails on the Cyber Essentials process. Same thing with Australia for Essential 8. So to help kind of provide that evidence to, help their clients get compliant is another big use case that we see when using our product.
Yeah, awesome. So looking forward, right? You guys have, moved obviously fast. You kind of put the right infrastructure in place. You're getting some velocity with MSPs, right? You got the right level of support. The enablement is there. I've kind of been able to obviously take a peek behind the scene and see where you guys are from an enablement standpoint, and seeing, I like just maybe a side tangent, just kind of visually the platform I think speaks to a technician, which I think a lot of vendors miss when they're building solutions. So kudos to you guys for that. But this market is moving extraordinarily fast, right? So how do you look at the next several years, the next 3 years, say, from a product standpoint, where do you want this to be in 3 years?
I would like to, ideally in the next 3 years, I would like to establish ourselves as a trusted player in vulnerability management for MSPs. I don't think anybody's quite taken the mantle away from Nessus and Qualys quite yet, Rapid7 as well. They're still seen as, they're all public companies, well established. Nobody's really taken that mantle from them in the MSP space, and nobody's done it in a cost-effective way. One of the things we pride ourselves on is to try to make this product as affordable as we can, right? At the end of the day, we have to run a profitable company, but we have fairly thin margins on the product, and we pride ourselves on that. And that helps us get as many MSPs as possible on that vulnerability management journey. And if you look at the Verizon data breach report from 2024, you see the fastest growing segment out of compromised credentials, phishing attacks, and then exploited vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities has made the most drastic increase over the last year, and that's specifically the problem we're solving for. So, with things like MFA, more robust security awareness training, threat actors are seeing vulnerabilities as sort of an overlooked gap or in the armor of a lot of businesses. So it's becoming only more and more important to be able to push vulnerability management technology out to as many small to mid-sized businesses as possible. The only way to do that is through the MSP channel. And that's our mission, is to get that kind of technology deployed on as many businesses as we can across the Western world.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, right? And I think that was definitely a takeaway from the DBIR is that the last couple of years, last 5, 6, 7 years, security awareness training is its own industry, right? And I mean, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of companies in that space now, and then you've got the maturing of access management and credential management and what have you. But yeah, I mean, vulnerability has been obviously around for a long time, but it's been a very complicated, very costly solution for most, right? And that's why, to your point, that's why they're kind of a handful that have kind of come in and out of the channel, and a lot of them are just essentially retreads of OpenVAS or something like that. But then you have this other kind of end of the spectrum that are really the Tenable, Qualys, Rapid7 kind of caliber, what have you. And so It's really interesting that there is there's an increased focus because I think the bad guys are realizing that the end users are starting to get a little bit more mature. Obviously, they still have a long way to go, but it's really about exploiting as many attack vectors, and that patch and just general vulnerability management seems like it's a space that was overlooked, and so it seems like you guys have a pretty good runway in front of you to make some hay happen here.
We certainly hope to be doing that. It's a journey that sometimes has some bumps in the road, but we're always evaluating, always learning, always listening, and always trying to improve and to make this something that every MSP can afford and deploy very effectively, and furthermore, something that they could easily make a healthy margin on, something they can some additional tool for them to start generating revenue from their end customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we're big fans, and I think again, I think you got a really interesting opportunity here to make some noise in this space and really scale this thing out. And so we'll be anxiously watching you guys, or rooting you guys on from the sidelines here for the next couple of years. But I want to thank you for jumping on with me and taking us through kind of your journey, and then obviously the good stuff that you're doing over there with the ConnectSecure. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Kevin. I appreciate the time today.
All right, you got it. Thanks, bud. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. See you.